This is the Modise Network. I'm Tim Modise. In the time of state capture and the widely reported looting in public institutions, the idea of judicial commissions and how efficient they are inevitably comes into play. Governance in corporate South Africa has also been dodgy, and there have been reports of corruption, as in the case of Steinhoff. And in many instances, these have threatened the investments of unsuspecting public and private institutions. And these are issues that we will be exploring in a moment. And we're asking why, if we have efficient investigative prosecutorial processes, we should resort to commissions. But earlier on, Advocate Mpofu, you were still continuing on the thought of land restitution and the amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution. Go ahead.
Yes. In brief, what I wanted to say is that the idea, the sheer idea that you can have land expropriation without compensation, without amending Section 25, is just not going to happen. That is just illogical, number one. Number two, the Section 25 and Section 9 of the Constitution, which is the Equality Clause, and this is a discussion that we've always had, do not belong to the same Constitution. You cannot have equality if you don't address the land question. So until we resolve that conflict between the Equality Clause and the land question, we're not going to go anywhere. Lastly, this idea that we have the best constitution in the world is absolutely to be rejected, because the constitution must be judged by what it produces. You can't say with the same mouth, we have the best constitution in the world, and then we say we have the most unequal society in the world. Because if it produces the worst inequality in the world, how can it be the best?
And of course, this is a matter that, in my case, I have to leave to the best legal minds in the country, like yourselves, and the politicians to go and canvass the idea. Well, that part I will take part in when we have the public debates. Let's come to the matter of state capture. That, you know, this matter has been out there in the public domain for some time. People have reported all kinds of things. There have been whistleblowers, there have been NGOs approaching the courts, trying to force NPA to do its work, the Hawks to do their work. Now we have a judicial commission of inquiry. Do you think, from your experience and observation, Advocate Ntsebeza, that this is the right way to go on this matter?
You know, commissions of inquiry, you know, have limitations. You have seen all of them. You know, the TRC, the Marikana Commission, they can only do so far. They can gather evidence, they can make recommendations, and in most cases, the recommendations from commissions of inquiry are not binding on those to whom the recommendations are made. So, on the one hand, you will collect a body of evidence, like for instance in the Marikana Commission, but look how long it has taken for the first policeman to be charged, because we acted for the widows and the victims, and but they were charged. But it took forever for the police to be charged, not so much because there had been a recommendation by the Commission of Inquiry, but because there was activity again by, you know, progressive organizations, political parties like the EFF and other organizations that way. So, yes, you know, commissions of inquiry, they have a limit. But then again, it goes back to what we have been saying about us embracing the rights and freedoms of a constitutional democracy. It should not be necessary to have these strings of commissions of inquiry. Well, if we're doing that which is expected. Because the more we go to court, the more we do what I usually say, the judicialization of politics.
Well, the Moerane Commission is one such example, I suppose, given, I mean, regarding the political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. As we now know, there were 3 more killings today. So what is to be done? What does it say, anyway, about the state of politics in South Africa, the fact that we resort to commissions?
Well, the point, remember what Advocate Ntsebeza said at the beginning of the program about the undesirability of ruling through the courts and political will. That's the most important thing. Remember, when people vote a government, they are giving it political power. What does the word power mean? It means the power to do things. So it should not be necessary that every time you want the government to do something, you must go to court. Because the power that they have is supposed to be to govern and to change people's lives and so on. And that is where the failure is. So it's the lethargy most of the time that makes people to have to take the long route of having to prod the government into action. It shouldn't be like that. Political power is for you. That's what they say when they are campaigning. Education for all, jobs, jobs, jobs. And then you say, okay, fine, here's the power to do that, and then they don't do it. And that's why you have NGOs now forcing basically the government to do its job.
But here's a different question altogether. I'm moving into the corporate sector now, that where people say, every time there's corruption, allegations thereof, it's always government, state capture this, state capture that, and we don't say anything about the poor governance that's going on, where investors have been exposed, and of course, clients, customers also fleeced by the shoddy dealings of private companies. South Africa's response to that, how do we deal with the problem from a legal point of view?
Well, as I say, there is more demand on adherence to the rights and freedoms offered by the Constitution on state and therefore on the public sectors than there is on private private sector. But there is no such a thing that private sector must be allowed to run riot and violate people's rights. We are all about rule of law. Is no one is above the law. That also means.
But the situation in South Africa, and it's been cast in racial terms in recent times, that private sector is white, therefore people don't complain about it. Public sector is black, and therefore allegations of corruption are more pressed against the public sector.
Well, I mean, we wouldn't have a Steinhoff, the debacle that has become Steinhoff, and many others that are going to be unearthed if it was the fact that, private sector is neglected. I think there's a perception there that, there is a lack of enthusiasm to pursue violations perpetrated by the private sector, and I mean that perception may well be true, because there haven't been as many actions against the private sector as there have been against your ESCOMs and everything.
Well, at least it appears that there's some light at the end of the tunnel if one looks at the class action on the silicosis matter with the mining companies.
Oh yes, yeah. And there are others that are coming.
Like which one?
The listeriosis.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is no debate. The Constitution binds everyone, whether you are in private industry or are in the public.
But is that your impression, that the private sector is allowed to run riot in the country and to be corrupt where it is corrupt, or has shortcomings that may be endangering the public or even compromising the interests of investors?
No, well, there are many factors that affect that. Part of that is the media. The media will, run riot, as you put it, when there's public sector corruption. But because the media itself is owned by profit and capital, the commercial sector, it is reluctant to deal with private sector corruption.
The coverage thereof, or what
the coverage, the public awareness thereof. For example, the Competitions Commission, which is really a body that looks into private sector corruption, is not as popular even in the media as the public protector. And I call the Competitions Commission the public protector of capital. But who's going to have you ever seen a journalist following up a competitions commission?
Let me challenge you. I raise my hand, sir.
Yes.
Okay, you watch this and see what happens.
Well, good. We will watch this space. But on a serious note, that is what needs to happen. But also, quite frankly, people are entitled to demand more from their government. Remember, okay, you're talking to the wrong person, because wearing my political hat, ideologically for me, business in a capitalist society is in any event corrupt. The whole thing is just inherently corrupt here. So you don't have to say this one or that one, they're all corrupt. Right. But with government, we are entitled to expect a modicum of
Advocate, we've had a go at the media. Let's see if we can have a go at the legal professionals themselves and the judicial officers. We'll have a discussion on this.
Talk to my lawyer.
Well, the law touches so many areas of our lives, but why does it matter? Find out when we come back, and I would like to hear your comments. #Modise Network @Team Modise.